Thank you. Hi, I'm going to call the meeting to order. We have a quorum. Can I get an approval of the minutes for the regular meeting of October 10th, 2011?
I move to approve the minutes of our meeting from October 10th.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Before we go to items for consideration, we have public comment. Molly?
No.
You can either go to either of the podiums.
Thinking I didn't even have the
And just state your name and your address for the record.
But now we have executive session. So.
Hello, my name is Molly Skelton, and I live on 1521 Greenwood Street. I come because I'm concerned about an event that happened as a consequence of the 50/50 sidewalk program that then ultimately affected my property and my husband's property. My husband, Todd, has just arrived. Do you want to introduce yourself? Or? No? Okay.
Todd Skelton, 1521 Greenwood Street.
Just a brief statement, well, a little bit longer than that. On August 25th, the Schroeder & Schroeder Concrete Company came and redid several blocks of concrete in front of our house in regards to a tree. The Department of Forestry was concerned about the tree, well, breaking the sidewalk, and so they were good enough in hiring Schroeder & Schroeder to come and redo the sidewalk in front of our house. On that day, apparently, our neighbor wanted to see if we could benefit from getting our gangway refinished. And ultimately, Schroeder & Schroeder came back on the 26th, which was a Friday morning, and fixed the gangway, fixed it, not to our satisfaction. In fact, what happened is that this began at about 6:45 in the morning. I called 311 to stop the event, and the two gentlemen who were fixing the concrete left, and so there was just basically the pit of the ground between mine and the other house. I asked them to stop work. I returned home at 4:30. They had ultimately, Schroeder & Schroeder, refilled the area with pavement. My mother had been there taking care of my daughter. She had even gone outside and said, "Please do not do this." My daughter has not okayed this. In fact, she called and asked you not to continue. That being said, excuse me, I went to the engineering department, the Office of Public Works, on Tuesday after talking to not only an engineer, but someone who had come. I had talked to Paul Snyder on Monday, and I had also talked to Howard Rudney. Paul Snyder is an engineer with the city. Howard Rudney is an inspector, and he inspected the property. Both of them said, "We see nothing wrong." I came here on Tuesday, and I talked with Satnagar. He said that, indeed, before Schroeder & Schroeder could do anything to the property, they needed to get my and my husband's permission to do it, which they did not get. And likewise, to come back and finish the property, they needed to get my and my husband's permission to do this. Satnagar said he would come and investigate the property 2 days later, and he also asked me to bring my plat of survey so we could show that to Satnagar and show what had happened. Now, albeit that it's assumed that this should be a problem with my neighbor, my opinion is that had Schroeder & Schroeder not even been doing the work in front of our house in regard to the tree and renewing concrete there, they never would have been hired to come over and fix the gangway, half of it, which was ours. And more importantly, had the Department of Public Works, specifically the engineers, also been more responsible, I think they would have had a different approach. Satnagar, again, on that Tuesday, said he would come, do an investigation, wanted to see our plat of survey. He returned on that Thursday, which was 2 days later, and with both additional employees, let me see. It was the engineer who's responsible for the 50/50 sidewalk program, and that was, let me see here. It wasn't Howard Rudney. At any rate, it was the man who's in charge of the 50, Dan Manis, and then another woman who was representing the Department of Forestry. They stood in our gangway, they looked on the property, they saw the damage, and they said, this is not our dilemma. You have to solve this with your neighbor. I've sent a letter to Schroeder and Schroeder and saying that I do expect them to come back free of work. So forth, this may not be an issue with the city, that is fine. My complaint is that when I noticed in the last week of September that the Committee of Public Works rehired Schroeder and Schroeder for another round of concrete contracting, that I do not think, they might be the lowest bidder, but I do not think that they are the most responsible one in terms of what they have done to our property. And likewise, it concerns me that as they go forward with the 50-50 sidewalk program and, let's say, randomly run into neighbors who would like to repair their sidewalk, they should take more responsibility, first in establishing a contract, and second in doing proper work on the job. I also would hope that the city of Evanston might remind the engineers at the Public Works Department that I believe, and I think my husband believes also, they need to take responsibility for these companies who are hired to come in and do work. I have concern that Schroeder and Schroeder has been doing decades of work, apparently. Set Nagar, in fact, said they're a company that has been in business since 1911. Maybe it's gone a little bit too far. The 50-50 sidewalk program, likewise, they are the only ones, because they are the lowest bidder, who have the opportunity to replace the sidewalk. And likewise, in terms of the nature of the support, the strong support that I found Set Nagar and others to have for the company in likewise refusing an investigation when he first offered one, that perhaps they shouldn't be the lowest bidder, or there should be bidders for other companies to come in and also bid on the property. The nature of the agreement, where in terms of 50-50, we go to someone who hires the city to replace the sidewalk, and then Schroeder and Schroeder is the company that isn't able to replace it, that really leaves a lot of open area in terms of some underhandedness. And that is only my opinion. I'm not levying any kind of accusation. But with the amount of irresponsibility that both this company showed, that should have known after working for decades in this community that they needed to get our writ of permission to do this, for them to have come back and even finish the project with my mother saying, do not do this, and they did, clearly they are not the most responsible contractor. They might be the lowest bidder, but they are not the most responsible one. I think my husband might be organizing a set of pictures. It was to the point where we even had what I might call concrete graffiti, where the gentlemen who were working on it spread concrete in other parts of our gangway. And not only that, they broke additional concrete, and they left paint marking on it.
I appreciate your comments. We have
you need to go
time,
on.
But, and I actually would, if the Assistant City Manager Marty Lyons could respond, that would be great. And yes, to go through it, because it's not, as our engineers mentioned, once it's on private property, it's not really the city's issue, but I would defer to our Assistant City Manager as well as our legal counsel on this. Alderman Rainey?
Well, while our legal counsel and Assistant City Manager are discussing this with these folks, I'd like to know why are people soliciting people doing public works for private property work? And two, even more egregious, is why are our contractors taking work from residents while they're on the job for the city? And that is a real concern of mine. And I don't know if it happens a lot or if this is a one-time thing, but this has problems all the way around.
So Marty Lyons will take information and
Okay.
move forward. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I know that there's some assessment that the city doesn't really have a whole lot of responsibility, but I did my homework and I talked with members of the engineering crew. And I found out, first of all, that in order to do any of the work, you obviously need to have the express written permission of the resident to begin the program, which they did not have. Secondly, they needed to have a permit to do the work if they were going to do that work, although I was also told that that's not necessarily true. They didn't have the permit, but the only way that they could actually get around having a permit was if they were to have a zoning review done, which meant somebody would have to come out, look at the project, look at the plans, and make sure that they had actually gone through the proper procedure. And so that way, when they were finished with the project, it was done to the exact specifications as the property looked beforehand, so that there weren't any major adjustments or and any alterations to the property. That being said, all of these things that Schroeder and Schroeder should have done were neglected. And my wife and I basically made it abundantly clear to the city of Evanston that we had expected a lot of these different things to have taken place. We've talked to numerous people in Public Works and the engineering department and spoken with them, and they've basically dismissed the whole idea and said that it's not their responsibility. And I'm actually kind of surprised, because honestly, when you come out and you look at my property and you know that this company has come here, they've done the work, they don't have any of the paperwork, you know it's not there. There was a stop order that my wife had requested that was placed at the Public Works Department that said, do not finish this project. And they did. So I wonder how the city really just washes their hands of this. It surprises me.
As I said, Assistant City Manager Lyons will get your information and go through this and talk to the head of Public Works as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Items for consideration, City of Evanston payroll through October 9th, 2011 at $2,507,443.79.
I move approval of the City of Evanston payroll through October 9th.
All those in favor? Aye.
Excuse me, Chairman, did we approve the minutes?
Yes. A2, City of Evanston bills fiscal year 2011 through October 25th, 2011, $2,513,040.72.
Move approval. Second.
People want to look at the bills list? Any questions?
Well,
Alderman Rainey?
when a question, for example, is asked, Evanston funeral and cremation removals, we see that every bills list. And, you know, it's 1,400 for 1 month and 1,100 for another month. And I ask, what services were provided in July and September? How does this work? I really would like to know, how many removals is that? And, you know, I don't need to know it right now, but the question really ought to be answered, and lately they're not really getting answered. The concept's being explained, but not the detail that I'm asking for. So it's fine now, you can tell me tomorrow or whatever, but I really want to know, what does this cost?
Any other questions on bills?
Did you know what Funk Oudic was? Did you?
Any other questions?
I have a
Sure.
question. 715 Chicago Avenue, where squatters broke in, and so we had to board up. Whose property is that, do you know?
I believe that's the Amley project? Is
Is that what that is?
is that right, Jeff? Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, there's glass everywhere. Alderman Holmes, do you have any questions? No, I'm okay. Fine. Alderman Rennie, can we vote?
I'm fine.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Move on to A3.1, approval of contract award to Broadway Electric for the 5 kV motor control center replacement at the water utility. Bid number 12-59. Staff recommends that City Council authorize the city manager to execute a contract for the 5 kV motor control center replacement in the amount of $394,745. The base bid amount is $390,295 and $4,450 for alternate one with Broadway Electric, located at 831 Oakton Street in Elk Grove, Illinois. Funding will be provided by the Water Fund account 73313.65515. Replacement of this equipment is necessitated due to fire damage and was therefore not budgeted. It is anticipated that the base bid amount of $390,295 will be reimbursed by insurance. The remaining $4,450 for alternate one will be funded by excess funds budgeted for capital projects that were deferred.
Move approval. Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Move on to A3.2, approval of 2011 CIP Sewer Rehabilitation Contract B award to American Pipeliners Incorporated. Staff recommends that City Council authorize the city manager to execute a contract for cured-in-place pipe lining, Contract B, with American Pipeliners in the amount of $161,698.50. Funding for this work will be from the Sewer Fund account, which has an allocation of $375,000 for sewer improvements on streets being resurfaced.
Move approval.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? A3.3, approval of sole source contract award for Fifth Ward Pilot Area Luminary Replacement Project to LCAS Lighting. Staff recommends that City Council authorize the purchase of 77 LCAS induction lighting units in the amount of $32,637.22 from LCAS Lighting, which is located at 815 South K Avenue in Addison, Illinois. LCAST is the sole distributor fabricator of the standard City of Evanston Talmadge Street light luminaries. Funding will be provided by the remaining balance, $19,000, in the street light upgrade project, and from a 50% equipment donation of $16,319 from Northwestern University.
Move approval.
All those in favor?
Aye.
A3.4, approval of contract award to Klaus Brothers Incorporated for the 2011 James Park renovations project. Excuse me. Staff recommends that City Council authorize the city manager to execute a contract with Klaus Brothers, located at 360 West Schaumburg Road in Streamwood, Illinois, for the 2011 James Park renovation project, and the total amount of $45,500. Funding will be provided by the fiscal year 2011 capital improvement plan in the amount of $7,369, and the remaining $38,131 from the 2011 CIP contingency account.
Second.
All those in favor? Oh, Alderman Rainey?
Did we know about the use of the money for the other purpose, the irrigation system or whatever the other was that we spent? Did we had a okay, I just, okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We're moving A4 and A5 to the end of the agenda because they're presentations. A6, City of Evanston's Commonwealth Edison franchise agreement and other issues associated with electric power reliability. Staff recommends that the City Council, number 1, receive this report. Number 2, refer to the city's utility commission the issue of municipal electric aggregation to study any potential benefit aggregation could have for Evanston residents and businesses, and report back to the City Council no later than February 29th, 2012. And number 3, request that the city work with the Northwest Municipal Conference on state legislation dealing with ComEd during the General Assembly's fall veto session.
Move approval.
Alderman Rainey?
You know, I'd really like the Administration and Public Works Committee to meet with the Utilities Commission. I can't help but, when I hear their name, think about the members that serve on that committee that also served on the Franchise Committee, pounding away at the fact that ComEd is so improved and, you know, let's let them go, let's not, let's reward them, let's not restrict them in any way, let's not make demands on them. So I'd like to know really where their heads are at on this whole thing, and if they've come up with anything useful regarding all of the outages so many of us suffered through for so long a period of time and lost so much in the way of quality of life, food, cleanup. So I'd just like to know where they're at. And also, I want to make certain that this does not eliminate, and I read it carefully, I don't think it does, but I want to make sure that the city manager and the utilities director are not attempting to eliminate the use of the franchise committee. It's been in existence for years and years, and I want to make sure that we're just directing the Utilities Commission to investigate prior to the expiration of our franchise.
City Manager?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, good evening. The action that's requested this evening deals with municipal electric aggregation in the state of Illinois.
Which was just so you know, City Manager, was a major discussion during the last franchise sessions. And we were told, of course, over and over, no, that's very bad, you can't do that. And don't forget, we have a most favored nations clause, and therefore, whatever you do, everybody else will be allowed to do, so we can't let you do anything. So I just want you to know that we've had the discussion. I read this, I think it's a brilliant strategy. I hope it works. But I want to make sure that in the final analysis, when it comes to franchise negotiations, the committee is not eliminated.
And Madam Chair, members of the committee, if the committee passes this recommendation, we would come back to you after the discussion at the Utility Commission with recommendations on the aggregation. And the first step would likely be approval by the council for a citywide referendum to ask the question, should the city become an electric aggregator? If that is then approved, there would then be discussions with an aggregator, and that would have an agreement. It wouldn't necessarily be a franchise agreement per se, but it would be an agreement. So as long as the committee understands that With the passage of this motion, staff would work with the Utilities Commission on the issue of municipal electric aggregation, come back with recommendations, should we move forward with a ballot initiative or not. That would be the next step if the council wishes to pursue that. So any negotiations with a third party to provide electrical service for all the residents of Evanston would only come after a ballot initiative.
Alderman
You know, did you call on me? Or?
No, well, it was Alderman, but you can continue on and then go to
Let me
Alderman Grover.
just finish. Here's the issue. I believe this is a political issue. I believe it's a strategy issue, a political issue, and I look to the Utility Commission for their technical expertise. I don't see this move as being a technical expertise move. And so I think we ought to be more involved in that, this whole council. And I'm not sure I value the Utility Commission's opinion on this any more than I do any of ours or our legal counsel. Our legal counsel especially, I would value his opinion or the department's opinion on this. This really isn't a technology issue at all, I don't think.
And Alderman Rainey, members of the committee, if the committee wishes to refer it back to staff or to another board or commission, it really comes to the question of what is the marketplace? What are options for our residents for electrical power? Whatever the power would be delivered through ComEd's delivery system. Yeah. So if you feel that there's a better group, we'd be happy. I think, though, that this is an issue that many communities around Illinois are facing. Our sister city, Oak Park, has already been through the process, already had their election, already selected their electric provider, and their residents are going to start seeing 10 to 15% decrease in their electric bills. But it's a process that has to have a start, and so we're proposing from a staff perspective, it makes sense to at least start a process. Where you'd like it to go is really up to this committee. If the Utility Commission is not the place, then please provide direction as to where you think it is. But my recommendation to you is let's start down the path of having additional discussions, provide you additional information.
But I think the Utility Commission is just the wrong place. I even think the Environment Board, might be a better place. This is really a strategy. It doesn't have anything to do with wheeling power or windmills. It's a strategy. It's what can we do under this franchise to bring savings to electric consumers.
And Alderman Rainey, members of the committee, while the franchise is obviously an important document, state law allows for the municipal aggregation. It's not something that's allowed or prohibited through the franchise agreement. It is allowed through state legislation. So again, we're happy. We can send it back to staff and we can come back with a presentation, send it to another board or commission. I just think that there's too much money to be saved potentially for all of our residents that we should at least get the ball rolling.
I couldn't agree with you more, but I don't see what it's going to do with the utility. That's all I'm saying. I think we could vote right now to tell you to go forward and let's get this done.
And if the committee would like to do that, that's perfectly fine.
If our legal counsel thinks we can do this based on state legislation that it completely flies in the face of what ComEd said, and I don't care what they said, frankly. I would rather listen to our legal counsel and to the state legislature. And just, let's get to the nitty-gritty and do it. What do you expect the Utility Commission to do for this?
Again, in the good tradition of the city of Evanston, people like to talk about issues, and this is a brand-new issue in the community, which certainly we look to our sister cities around Illinois. The village of Oak Park spent months and months and had multiple citizen committees and had multiple public meetings. If that's not the route that the Evanston City Council wants to go, hooray. But we're just trying to provide you a path that we thought was appropriate. A citizen committee is a normal, appropriate path for Evanston to take on a new issue. If you'd rather for us just to come back with a report on aggregation, and we can certainly do that. Ms. Hurley, who will be with us later this evening, and I and the mayor have met with all of the companies that, well, about a dozen companies licensed to do aggregation in Illinois. We probably have seen 8 of the 12 have come and looked, and we have said that we were bringing this issue to the council for policy consideration. If you'd like to refer it back to staff, that's great. If you'd like to refer it somewhere else, that's great. My recommendation as city manager is let's just get on with it.
Alderman Grover?
I guess I'd like to get on with it as well. I love the idea of electric aggregation. And so my question is, if we're heading to a referendum on the question of electric aggregation on the same timing as the municipal elections or the primary elections in March, it would seem to me that we need to get a good start on it sooner rather than later. And I hate to bypass our experts on the Utility Commission, but if they could be included anyway in the presentation and discussion, that might be just as good. Is this a matter of, Mr. Bobkowitz, of having a great big bright idea and finding ourselves in the I don't know, getting fired at for having good big bright ideas and knowing that the backlash would be for not including residents in those discussions?
My job as your city manager is to provide you opportunities to involve your residents all the times you think you want to.
Which we definitely want to do in this case, but it's also, it seems to be a matter of some critical timing.
If you're
Especially
looking, if the
referendum's
council
required.
later this evening chooses to have another special municipal election in March, then yes, it would make sense that this could be a companion measure on that ballot.
Could we still achieve that could we make this happen? before
Well,
our
I think there are
January's deadline
templates,
for
there are
another-
templates we can look at with other communities, which we have not yet looked at, but certainly there are communities similar to us that have already done this in Illinois within the last 24 months. So I think we could easily go to them and look and see how that was. So if the committee wishes to move faster, I'd recommend you refer it back to staff for a report back as soon as possible. To put this on the March ballot, the council would need to act by January 3rd. So practically speaking, that means your single meeting in the month of December.
When does our Utility Commission meet next?
They meet the first part of every month. First Friday, is it, Mr. Stonebeck?
It's the second Friday of every month.
So they haven't met yet for November.
For
That's
November.
coming.
They have not.
But certainly these issues have been discussed at the Utilities Commission. They've been discussed at the Environment
have
Board, on and off, because this is an issue that's facing other municipalities around Illinois.
So are we hoping for a formal recommendation from our Utilities Commission, or can we proceed by including them in our discussion at the council level without a
That
formal
absolutely,
recommendation?
again, it's a policy question for the council. If you feel that this is something that's of interest and you want to get on with it, then my recommendation would be the motion should change to refer this back to staff and the Corporation Counsel's office to prepare necessary documents to place a referendum on the ballot for March, and we would work diligently to do that.
Well, let's do that. I have another question. The third part of this agenda item has to do with the legislation that's before the Illinois General Assembly, and you sent a late email today with regard to the status of those discussions. Can you give us an update now? I haven't had a
Certainly.
chance to read it. I'm sorry.
Certainly. We are not alone in our frustration with Commonwealth Edison, and other communities in Northwest Illinois have been working through the auspices of the Northwest Municipal Conference on a potential trailer bill that would deal with this larger smart grid bill that's been vetoed. So now the veto session begins tomorrow in Springfield. There have been discussions with Commonwealth Edison and the Northwest Municipal Conference over the last several days. We do not believe, as the conference, that we have a solution or a deal with ComEd. ComEd is now already going around saying that there is a deal, despite that there is not one. And I've learned in my short time back in Illinois that that's a pretty regular legislative tactic. Tell everyone that there's a deal when there's not a deal. So that's apparently the path that Commonwealth Edison is now taking. So in your packet, there's a white paper that was compiled by the Northwest Municipal Conference under the leadership of the village manager of Glenview, who led a group of elected officials and appointed officials this past summer to come up with this white paper. That white paper has now become a bill, which potentially could be a part of a larger package to come up with a solution to the smart grid question that Commonwealth Edison is facing.
So the Northwest Municipal Conference has drafted legislation in response to the...
In a late email this afternoon, which I forwarded on to the council, that white paper has now been made into into a bill, and I can tell you quickly the number of that bill, but that is not a part of Senator Cullerton, who is sort of quarterbacking all this, not a part of his trailer bill, which is a separate document. So if you give me a second, I'll pull up the email. So Mayor Tisdale is heading to Springfield on Wednesday. She plans to be there Wednesday and Thursday. She's co-chair of the Northwest Municipal Conference's Legislative Committee. I'll be joining her on Wednesday as well. So this is a very fluid situation, and the mayor feels very strongly that Evanston's interests be represented in dealing with whatever the solution is. She's committed to go back to Springfield for the second week of the veto session in 2 weeks' time. But at this point, we're still grappling with what this all may be. So
I'm scanning your email, Mr. Bobkowitz. I don't see the number for the Northwest Municipal Conference. Oh, wait, 2507, Senate bill?
and you found it quicker than I did, so I apologize. But
Wait, introduced today, a Senate Bill 2507.
so these things are fluid. The action before,
The trailer bill, sorry, is House Bill 3036.
which I believe is the main trailer bill.
Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, members of the committee, part of this requested action would be to approve that the city continue to work over the next few weeks with Mayor Tisdale's leadership on these initiatives, working side by side with our sister cities of the Northwest Municipal Conference.
Alderman Rainey, or Alderman Grover, are you finished?
I was going to amend the motion then, if I
Okay.
may, that the committee recommends we, one, receive the report, two, that we include the Utility Commission in further discussion of aggregation, but that staff report back to the City Council in December, at our meeting in December, as to how we would proceed on a referendum as to electric aggregation. And three, that we continue to work with the Northwest Municipal Conference and state legislation dealing with ComEd during the fall veto session.
Can I get a second?
So I've just changed the second point
Right.
in that.
You should change it to November. Put that-
Would December give us enough time, Mr. Bobkowitz, to get a referendum?
Strictly speaking, yes. I think that, why don't you let us do this? Why don't you let us reach out to some of our sister communities that have already done this, gather that information up for you in December, present some additional information about aggregation. If the council feels comfortable, then we can move forward. If the council has questions, we can wait until the municipal election or the next general election in November.
In November. And if you find you have information that's ready in November, I'm sure we would be receptive.
And I think if you allow me the flexibility to bring back information if it's ready earlier, we will be happy to do that.
Alderman Rainey?
City Manager, unless you were an official with Commonwealth Edison,
Which I am not.
no, what would be an objection to aggregation?
By going through a referendum, you are tying every resident of Evanston to the aggregator, and they have the opportunity to opt out.
They can opt out.
If they do not opt out, then their electric company changes without any further action on their part based on the result of the referendum.
Well, but that's not a reason, I mean, they can opt out, so they don't have to be part of it. So
They would
okay,
have to actively
opting out is
opt-
an action they might not want to take, so they might, all right, otherwise. What I just can't imagine people not wanting to support this, but let's say there are some that don't. This community is going to get involved. For God's sakes, look at plastic bags. I mean, if I get one more form letter on plastic bags, I might even vote for the tax if I get one more letter.
It's not a tax, is it?
I think, the one important piece I would like to see, and I think the legal department's paper on this was fabulous. I mean, I don't know what else you would want to know. I would like to know the position of Commonwealth Edison regarding our franchise and our going forward with aggregation. I don't really care what they say, I just want to know what they say, because I want us to go forward no matter what they say.
Certainly.
But I'm just concerned about what their position on this is. Because
Certainly.
I'm not sure the communities you mentioned have a franchise, do they?
Yes.
Do they have
Because
the,
the lines and the poles still belong to Commonwealth Edison, and the franchise agreement is largely about the lines and poles in the community, not the provision of the power. So under state law, if Evanston goes with Acme Electric Company, there will still be a portion of the bill that is paid to Commonwealth Edison, and actually Commonwealth Edison
Right.
will continue doing the billing for Acme or whatever
but
company
do
we would
they're
choose.
not part of the Northwest Municipal Conference franchise, the Oak Park?
The agreements aren't,
no.
but franchise agreements exist in every community where there are
but
poles.
really I misspoke. What I meant to ask is, they're not part of the Northwest Municipal
That's
Conference?
correct, they are not.
And neither are we, so.
Yeah, no, we are part of the Northwest Municipal.
No, we're not. We don't have that franchise.
But we are a member of the conference.
We are a member of the conference, but we don't have the electric franchise.
We do not have their model franchise
That's
agreement.
correct.
That's
All right, we have a motion on,
This could be very exciting.
we have a motion. We need a second for the motion.
Second,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
but I would like to, I know this isn't part of the motion, but I'd like the Environment Board to be involved in this. I mean, Utility Commission,
We-
whatever.
We can-
Everybody who wants to be
We can
involved.
direct staff to
Everybody.
do that.
And perhaps we'll have some sort of larger meeting to invite everyone,
That would be
including other
great.
interested residents, to talk about this prior to coming back to the council. Thank you.
A7, ordinance 79-0-11, amending Class AC liquor licenses, authorizing limited alcohol consumption in viewing auditoriums. Local Liquor Commissioner recommends City Council adoption of ordinance 79-011, which amends the Class AC liquor license to allow patrons to purchase alcohol in the theater cafe and take their alcoholic beverages inside arts, cinema, viewing auditoriums during motion pictures rated PG-13 or R, and special events.
Move approval.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. A8, ordinance 82-0-11, decreasing the number of Class C liquor licenses due to a change in ownership of Jackie's on Prairie. The local liquor commissioner recommends introduction, suspension of the rules, and adoption of ordinance 82-011 to decrease the number of Class C liquor licenses from 26 to 25 due to a change in ownership for Jackie's on Prairie, which is located at 2545 Prairie Street.
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A9, ordinance 83-0-11, increasing the number of Class C liquor licenses to permit issuance to Silva Winston LLC, new owner of Jackie's on Prairie. The local liquor commissioner recommends introduction, suspension of the rules, and adoption of ordinance 83-0-11 to increase the number of Class C liquor licenses from 25 to 26 to permit issuance to Silva Winston LLC, new owner of Jackie's on Prairie.
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? A10, ordinance 84-0-11, increasing the number of Class B liquor licenses to permit issuance to Taco Diablo, located at 1029 Davis Street. The local liquor commissioner recommends passage of ordinance 84-01-11 to increase the number of Class B liquor licenses from 16 to 17 to permit issuance to Taco Diablo LLC, which is located at 1029 Davis Street. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A11, ordinance 87-0-11, authorizing a cable franchise system between the City of Evanston and Comcast of Illinois 4, Incorporated, for a period of 7 years. Staff submits for consideration ordinance 87-0-11, which would renew Comcast non-exclusive cable system franchise with the city for a period of 7 years.
Move approval.
Do we have a second? Alderman Grover, and then Alderman Rainey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I need some additional information about our negotiations with Comcast on this. Why 7 years? I did consult with my brother, who's a intergovernmental relations lawyer for Cox Communications in Atlanta, Georgia, and he says actually we've gotten a pretty good deal here, but it's the 7 years that I still have concerns with. And are we preserving all of our public educational governmental options? Can we enhance them?
Madam Chair, Alderman Grover, members of the committee. As I reported to you a couple months ago when I was here to talk about the negotiations with Comcast, the opportunities that we have under federal law to receive not only a franchise fee but also a fee for public education and government access. We collect the maximum franchise fee allowed under federal law and a PEG fee that is as high as any other community, not only in Illinois that I'm aware of, but in the United States that I'm aware of. So for those 2 points, I think we're in good shape. There have been lots of changes with the public education and government access portion of the community and ECMC, which provides that service. As the council is aware, they are in a process of moving from their long-time facility on Hartree to a facility that will be here at our service center. So a portion of the negotiations was who would bear the cost of moving what's known as the head end or the place where ECMC connects into the cable system from Hartree to the service center. Comcast estimated that the cost of that move was $70,000. Absent a franchise agreement discussion and no language in our previous agreement, that cost will be borne by the city or ECMC or some combination of the two. So as a portion of these discussions, we asked Comcast if they would bear the cost for the movement of the head end. So they will do that as part of this agreement. So that will move to the service center. We're hopeful the ECMC has not set a final date to leave their building. They are still in negotiations with their landlord to end their lease early. Their hope is to be out by the end of the calendar year. As we look at the schedule working with Comcast to move this head end, it probably will not be till sometime in January when the head end would be moved. So we're working with ECMC to make sure that the equipment that is currently at their location on Hartree remains probably through the balance of January. And Mr. McCrae and I have been working closely not only with ECMC but the 2 school districts who also depend on this head end. Basically everything feeds to that point on Hartree and then goes out into the cable system. Both District 65 and District 202 are concerned about not having their meetings cablecast. We're certainly concerned that we would not have our meetings cablecast. So we've looked at that third weekend in January, which is the Martin Luther King holiday weekend, where this council will be dark. There'll be no school board meetings. So we're hoping that that third weekend in January would be the time frame that the transition would be made. In talking with representatives from Comcast, they have not made any guarantees that that could happen, but they're hopeful as long as we conclude the franchise soon. So we're here this evening with this. If the council signs off, and we're asking also for a suspension of the rules so this could be finalized to allow Comcast and their construction folks to get started with the work that needs to be done to move the head end from Hartree to the service center. So that's one component. A second component is a favorable rate on internet access that was negotiated as part of this agreement. That's something that has not been typical. Alderman Rainey talks about model agreements with other groups like the Northwest Municipal Conference. Well, there's a Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus model agreement for cable television franchises. And so we have tweaked a little bit, and one of the things we've added through a side letter is an agreement from Comcast for very favorable rates through the course of the agreement for internet access. We would like to use their internet access to supplement our main backbone of internet access that we get through the state of Illinois, facilitated through the fiber network that we use with Northwestern University through the community. So those are the two things. And then the final issue that you raised was the term. In talking with Comcast representatives, about 98% of the terms of agreements that they do in the state of Illinois are 10 years. There are a handful of 7s and perhaps 1 or 2 5s. I asked Comcast for a agreement less than 10 years, basically based on our experience with other entities we have franchise agreements with. And this council, I think, has said shorter is better. And 7 years, I think, is a shorter window than 10 years. Lots of changes still to come in the cable television industry. My guess is they'll be spending more time in broadband internet and less time on video. And so the next 7 years could be a changing time, and they were not prepared to go to 5 years because really they only have 1 or 2 5-year agreements, and there are separate issues apparently that were particular to those kinds of communities. They also indicated that 5 years would also jeopardize some of the other items that were included in our franchise agreement. So 7 years seemed like a good time period. It's less than most of our neighbor communities, but again, I think based on the past practice of the Evanston City Council, you like to take a little bit shorter franchise agreement than your neighbors.
Yeah, because we're kind of particular too, and I was thinking a shorter term would allow us to be able to stay nimble. My other concern is that we're requested to suspend rules tonight and get this all done. There's no more 2 weeks room in these. Either the negotiations have already wrapped up, but Comcast really is on such a tight schedule to do the construction and move the equipment that we don't have 2 more weeks to do that.
Alderman Grover, we always have 2 weeks, and if the council would feel more comfortable, we're just trying, as we've looked at the calendar, as to what would be the least disruption, not only to the city council cable cast, but also to the school board meetings. That 3rd week in January seems to be the week of least disruption. And so we'd like to shoot for that, and the sooner we're done, the more likely we'll make that time frame. If the council has concerns about issues, this is a long time, and when you weigh those concerns against 2 weeks, you should take the 2 weeks. But we think we've done a good job with this agreement. Quite honestly, the federal government has taken away a lot of the latitude that cities have had. Evanston was always in the forefront on fees, not only the franchise fee, but the PEG access fee. We've had the PEG access operation here for a very long time. Many of our neighbor communities have not, and as they've renegotiated their agreements, those have been very contentious discussions because they have had facilities that were offered by the cable company and her guarantees for equipment and time. All those things have not been an issue here for 25 years. Our friends in the village of Skokie, I mean, they went through a very difficult discussion because their community members had relied on those resources from Comcast, and Comcast basically said, we're getting out of the public access business. We'll provide you some limited access, but not the access that you had. But here in Evanston, it's always been a cash deal with ECMC. So again, we feel very confident that this is a good franchise agreement. The 7 years is shorter than nearly all of our colleague cities around the area. And I think it's a good idea to have that 5 years versus 7 years. I fear would jeopardize the $70,000 that we're getting for the value of the move of the head end. If that wasn't an issue with this, maybe it would make more sense to talk some more about a shorter term. But there's a cash value to that for Comcast because it's actual time and equipment that they're going to be expending to make that change at our request, not because something they have done, but because of our request with ECMC's relocation.
Alderman Rainey, then Alderman Holmes.
Well, I don't mind the 7 years, given that it's non-exclusive. However, you explained how we get more, and we're maybe more than the average community does. What I want to know is how are rates set for the various communities? Is there a standard? Well, I would imagine that our rates are right up there with, we get more back. Are we putting more in? That's what I want to know.
Rates were, the ability to regulate rates were taken away from local governments probably in excess of 10 years ago.
I know that, but how are they regulated? How does Comcast do it?
The Federal Communications Commission, if an individual has a problem with a rate, they may petition the Federal Communications Commission.
Not the answer to my question. My
I'm sorry.
question is, how does Comcast determine what the rates are? Do they
Mr.
say, up Evanston, you get 70-some thousand for this, or it's going to cost us that, so we're going to somehow or another up the rates, 0.5% this month? And how does that work?
I think we have someone
Mr.
from
Jewell
Comcast.
is representative of Comcast is here this evening, and
Why does my sister get more and pay less than I do? That's what-
when you say more, you mean more programming, or more
Yes,
channels?
more programming
Okay.
and pays less.
Okay.
Could you state your name and your position?
Good evening, folks. Thank you for inviting me here. My name is Frank Duell. I'm
Hi,
the
Frank.
Senior Manager for Government Affairs for Comcast in this area. I've been your representative since 1999. I've been the cable guy for about 30 years. I speak to Alderman Rainey quite often.
Very responsive.
Rates are determined by the FCC. We have to do a filing every year. And basically what goes into that is our cost of doing business. So for all of the maintenance of all the lines that you see throughout the community, all of the service people that we have, all of the trucks, all the computer systems, so on and so forth, that goes into a calculation of a formula that the FCC has devised. You end up with a high level and a low level. I can assure you that virtually everyone in this business takes one in the middle, because you're never going to put yourself out of business in a competitive market by taking a price that's too high. I'm not sure the reference you make to someone from another community receiving more channels for less. I can tell you that since all of the mergers of the cable companies starting back in 1995, one of the things that we've tried to do is standardize channel lineups and standardize prices for those. There are some anomalies that go into that, old existing programming contracts, some of the historical technical architecture of old systems, but quite frankly, for the majority of the market, all of our pricing and the majority of our channel lineups are the same. In a competitive market, and I could address this, Alderman, to your question about the length of the term, we're driven, before we're ever driven by regulation, we're driven by competition these days. We have competitors out there throughout the community on all of our lines of business. The contract you have for consideration here is for the video business. We certainly know in the city of Evanston that we have direct competitors here, and that's what drives our prices and the conduct of our business every day.
Alderman Holmes?
Oh, I really was asking
Thank you.
Alderman Grover in terms of what did you want to look for in these other 2 weeks that you'd want to wait?
I was just
I mean-
thinking that if there were other residents who had concerns and had information to share, that it could bubble to the surface in the next 2 weeks. And this is a 7-year franchise agreement, and there might be others who would be interested who perhaps didn't know was on the agenda tonight or follow the issues. We have a lot of
And Alderman Grover, members of the committee, we did review as part of our franchise discussions complaints that we receive. There have been a couple of very specific complaints of some specific residents. I think one that comes to mind is the closed captioning for pay-per-view movies. That Comcast has a federal obligation to have closed captioning for pay-per-view movies. And so Frank has been very good helping us work with the 1 or 2 particular residents that have had that concern, and I believe we provided them proper converter boxes that they would be able to get that. So I think by and large, we get calls because on the bill was the city manager's office phone number until March 1st, and now it's 311. So we still do get phone calls from people, and Mr. McCray, I think, sees or hears about all of them, and it's mostly, things like channel lineup changes and, why did my HBO go up? So it's not necessarily, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. McCray, it's not been, my service has not been good, my cable isn't operating properly. It has been about, why is my HBO so much? Why was something on this tier and now is on another tier? Issues that are not within the purview of our franchise agreement, we pass those along to Mr. Jewell, and as many of you have dealt with them in the past, and certainly I have dealt with cable my whole professional career, and he's probably the most responsive cable guy I've ever worked with. So, and I've worked with dozens of them in various communities and various companies over time. So, we could provide Alderman Grover a list of the complaints. that we've received, but it's certainly
Thanks,
less
but no
than
thanks.
certainly less than any community I've ever worked in. And Comcast through Mr. Jewell is about as responsive as I've ever seen. So I think we've got a good relationship. There's very little that we have other than providing this agreement, very little to regulate other than having the agreement in place. So, Madam Chair, I think it's up to the committee if you'd like to move it to council this evening. If you would, we'd appreciate the waiver of the rules.
We have
Let's move it.
okay, we've moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Okay, we're moving backward to A4, 2012 Water Main Replacement and Street Resurfacing Program. Staff recommends City Council approval of the proposed list of projects to be included in the 2012 Water Main Replacement and Street Resurfacing Program, subject to final approval of the fiscal year 2012 Capital Improvements Plan. In addition, staff recommends the development of a new 5-year street improvement plan from fiscal year 2013 until fiscal year 2017 to be completed in 2012. And I believe we have a presentation. Thank you.
Madam Chair, committee members, Director Stonebeck, I'm Paul Schneider. I'm the city engineer. And this evening I want to present our proposal for the 2012 street resurfacing project. We've got about 190 miles of streets here in Evanston. By and large, they are asphalt surfaced, about 95%. We try and evaluate the streets every 5 years. We do that in order to set up a program, a running program for our maintenance projects. The last street improvement program was approved by council back in 2006, covered a period from 2007 through 2011, which have wrapped up this year. And in fact, we did not, or rather we deferred street evaluation last year. So the 2007-2011 program has actually been extended into 2012. Even having done that, we are not actually paving all the streets that we had originally planned on. Streets included in the program were based on the field test, our staff inspection input, primarily from our streets and sanitation workers and who are out there every day on the streets. We also coordinate our projects with water main replacement. We work with Department of Utilities closely every year to try and optimize that work. And we also sometimes, although rarely, move projects around based on private development. Some of the rehabilitation strategies that we use here in the city, minor patching and crack filling. Minor patching, really better known as potholes. That's pothole filling is done by our streets and sanitation crew. Those crews also do some minor grinding and resurfacing and overlay in areas that aren't too large, and that happens every year throughout the city. Some of the larger projects in the neighborhood streets and the arterial streets that actually become part of our resurfacing program. The neighborhood streets, typically we will grind. There'll be some minor base repair, spot curb and gutter with an asphalt overlay. On our larger arterial and collector streets, we do a little bit more work on the base. We will typically repair or replace the entire curb and gutter in order to get better drainage on those streets, and use a thicker overlay of asphalt. And then finally, there have been occasions where we have reconstructed streets. It's rare. The last one that was fully reconstructed was McCormick Boulevard. So primarily, we look at major rehab on our arterial streets. Modifications to the program. Every year, we go back and look at the program. Particularly as you get toward the end of a 5-year program, you find yourself going back trying to pick up streets that had not been done in the previous years that they were planned. The primary reason for modification has been funding availability. I think originally the program had targeted a funding level of $1.2 million from the MFT fund, and then another $3 million, which was borrowed money in the CIP fund. I know in the 3 years I've been here, we have not operated quite at that level. So we've gotten behind what the original plan had intended. The other reasons for modifications, again, coordination with other departments, primarily utility department, to coordinate our water main work with our street resurfacing work. We, again, have a number of carryover projects, especially here at the end of the 5-year program, going back to get projects that were deferred from previous years. The water main replacements we had talked about, comparative road conditions. Really what that means is, as our streets and sanitation staff, observe year after year, some roads are just deteriorating faster than others, and roads that may not have originally been on the list have become, found their way on the list, just based on really the condition and wear and the amount of effort our street crews are putting into some of these streets to maintain them. Potential conflicts with other city projects, again, depending on what's going on with water main primarily and some of the other underground work. We do jockey the program from year to year in order to try and accommodate that. So this year,
I would love to see it.
and this is both these, the list and also a map you'll see in your handout. But basically what you'll see, again, is the program broken into an MFT portion and a CIP portion. Traditionally, the MFT portion of the program we've used to try and address work on neighborhood streets. This year, we did move one of the water main streets into the MFT program. Traditionally, we haven't done that, but in order to get the funding to cover up basically some of these water main streets, rather than leave it with a trench patch, we moved Ashland Avenue into the MFT program this year. In the CIP portion of the program,
Mr. Schneider, what's trench patching?
Trench patching, a number of these streets, again, we coordinate with our water main projects. So trench patching basically is cutting a trench in the road surface for a water main, and that trench will typically be 5 to 6 feet wide, and we will install the water main, cover the trench back up, and then just put an asphalt layer over the surface of the patch. In those cases, the entire street does not get resurfaced. It is left with a patch 5 to 6 feet wide. Traditionally, we do not do that. I think the last one that was done was on Greenleaf in the first ward with some mixed results. And that street was one that was actually in better condition, and I think that's why it was undertaken as just a patching program instead of an entire resurfacing program. Again, mixed results. We took a little bit of criticism because typically what the city has done is when we do a water main project, we go ahead and do the street project with it and take care of it all right when we're there, try and take care of the base underground work and this resurfacing work at the same time. We're really no longer in a position where we can do that. So in the CIP program, you're going to see a number of streets that are listed as trench patch only, and Ashland Avenue would have fallen into that same category had we not moved it into the MFT program. This year, the MFT program is going from $1.2 million to $1.4 million. The primary reason behind that is the state has provided an additional $300,000 or $350,000 worth of MFT money, and that's part of the capital program, and the city will receive those additional funds for 5 years. So we're in the second year of that. So there's a little additional balance in that fund that we're able to make that accommodation this year, and we'll be able to do the same for 3 future years. But we're at a point now where we're making tougher decisions on, which streets to do. I know in the utilities department, they have a regular program of making sure that we get at least 1.5 miles of water main done every year. So basically, that's just trying to keep up with the amount of water main that's in the city that's 80 to 90 years old. Also this year, you're going to see another additional layer of TIF program funded resurfacing projects. And where we have the opportunity, and primarily along Church Street, we're trying to address Church Street this year. Church Street runs through several different TIF districts, so it gives us the opportunity to tap into TIF funds in addition to, having to rely on borrowing all the time. So I don't know if you want me to go through each and every street, but
No.
okay,
no.
I will.
And we
I will
appreciate you
bear
asking.
I will spare you. I will spare you that. And I've got one more slide I'm going to go through quick, and I'll allow questions. So really then, our 2013 to 2017 street program, this year we do want to go out and retest the streets and reevaluate them and re-rate them to get a program going through 2013 and 2007. As I said, we are set up, this program would take care of 2012, but primarily it's taking care of streets that weren't taken care of in the previous program. We'll have staff verification, based, we'll take the road testing. Staff will go out and see that we agree with it in general, or if we have any issues with it. We'll coordinate with the utility department and try and sync our road paving program with Director Stonebeck's water main program. And from there, then develop a 5-year program that we'll bring to council next summer. So that is our plan moving forward, and we hope to stay as aggressive as we can with addressing some of the street issues. And I will be happy to take any questions or comments.
Any questions? Alderman Rainey?
I don't have a question, but Paul, I've talked to both Suzette and to Dave Stonebeck, and we're going to take the Howard Street Custer to Chicago Avenue off the program this year. And also that's for the committee also. So.
Okay, got it.
And I want to thank you for picking one street, at least in the 9th Ward of Madison, which is really awful. I mean, I think that's the only one in the 9th Ward.
You've got Main Street too, and
It's about 100 feet of 9th Ward.
Okay.
At the most.
No, yeah,
Madison's terrible, so.
It's all the tip of the, there are other streets as well we'd like to address.
Yeah,
Right.
so thank you. There's no questions?
Thank you.
We need
Sure.
to.
Yeah.
Vote.
Yeah, no. We have it
It's been moved
and
in.
seconded.
Oh, has it? Oh, then I need to amend. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I thought we just had the president. Madam Chairman, I'd like to amend the program by eliminating the Howard Street from Custer to Chicago Avenue just for this year. The problem being is, first of all, the street's not bad at all because it was paved not too long ago. We probably do need a new water main. It's all been explained to me as to why it was recommended. However, there's going to be several pieces of economic development and new business going in that area, and that shuts down space in front of a business. And so we're going to just wait a year and see.
I'll second it.
Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we move on to A5. We also have a presentation. March 1, 2011 Police and Firefighter Pension Actuarial Report. Staff recommends that City Council review and approve the March 1, 2011 actuarial valuation for usage in the 2011 tax levy for police and firefighter funding purposes. The recommended actuarial required contribution, as determined by the study, is $6,401,393 for the firefighters' pension fund and $8,521,751 for the police pension fund. And we have a presentation.
So let's move in second.
Yes.
Second.
Okay. Thanks.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Marty Lyons, Assistant City Manager and Treasurer. Tonight I'm doing my treasury duties. We'll be presenting a brief presentation from our new actuary. As you noted in the report, the joint committee, per the direction of the City Council last year, we did form a joint committee, reviewed actuarial firms, selected Art Tepfer and his firm as the actuary, and as noted in there, they're a very experienced firm and have, especially in downstate police and fire pension funds. And I will not, given we've had a busy AMPW meeting, I'll be happy to go through parts of my report after Mr. Tepfer gives a briefing on the report for this year. This is the first year that we'll be operating under the new statutes that were adopted in 2010. Mr. Tepfer.
Thank you. Madam Chairperson and members of the committee, thank you very much for inviting me. It's not often that I get to present to a city board, but it's always fun. I'm going to give you a brief summary of what many people have referred to as Actuary 101. I'm going to assume that most of you are unfamiliar with what we do. This should take in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 minutes, and we'll get to the specifics of your particular pension funds later in the report. The concept of funding is what everyone seems to be somewhat concerned with. And we fund pension plans for three basic reasons. Number one is because the police officers and firefighters are going to retire at some point, and they're going to be provided with a pension, and we want to provide some type of benefit security. As I like to say, pensions are not paid with promises. The only city that does that is the city of Rosemont, and they have more money than God, so they don't have to worry about funding their pension fund. They're also, believe it or not in the downstate pension system. They have a municipal ordinance. That's because they actually have fewer than 5,000 people who live in Rosemont. The second is budgetary control. Municipalities do not like to see pension contributions increase and decrease, et cetera, so up and down, up and down. So we try to use methodologies that enable you to budget properly. And the last concept is what I refer to as intergenerational equity. We want the current generation of taxpayers to be paying for the pensions that are being earned today and not passing off the costs of the pensions to our grandchildren. I'm going to hope that this works. In the public sector, generally, taxpayers will absorb the risk. The actuarial funding methods are really budgetary approaches of ways of accumulating the assets so that we can pay for the pension fund. We want that intergenerational equity to be the most important. Balance sheet liability is usually not an issue in the public sector because the GASB rules, the Government Accounting Standard Board rules, do not put the actuarial liability on the balance sheet. But if we hold our breath, and I know Mr. Lyons is holding his, the new GASB rules will move it up to the balance sheet, and it will become a completely different game that we are playing later on. We use the term funding to try to get a handle on where we are in the pension fund. I'm not a big fan of what is called funding and funding percentages. I believe that it's really a myth, and I'm going to show you right now why that's the case. What the funded percentage is simply a ratio, a quick ratio, we call it, of the assets in the pension fund to the liabilities. It's very easy to measure the assets. You have cash, you have equities, you have bonds, you have fixed income investments, et cetera, and they're all in terms of dollars. We can count the dollars. The liabilities are a lot more difficult to measure, and it is a ratio of assets to liabilities. Oh, okay. Yes, sir. I will. I have a concept that I want you to understand. I want you to envision a very, very large hole in the ground, and that hole represents all of the liabilities of your pension plan, be it your police pension plan or your fire pension plan, a very, very big hole. An actuary, maybe one who works for the state of Illinois or maybe another actuarial firm, looks at that hole and says, That is a very big hole. That hole is 37 feet deep and 28 feet wide. Now, another actuary, as I like to say, maybe a good-looking guy with a beard, looks at the same hole and says, well, sir, I think that hole is only 35 feet deep, and it's only 24 feet wide. Two actuaries looking at the same hole in the ground and have different opinions. The reason, we do not have the tools to measure how big the hole is. We don't have a tape measure where we can crawl in and measure it. So all we have is our eyes. We refer to these as our actuarial assumptions as to what we see. Two actuaries, or three, looking at the same hole will have different opinions. Now let's take some dirt. There's one of our municipal employees putting the dirt into the hole to fill it up, and maybe the dirt comes up 80% of the way. Well, we say that that hole is 80% filled, or in actuarial terms, we would say that hole is 80% funded. Of course, if we take the same dirt and we put it into a slightly smaller hole, what's going to happen? 90% funded? I like to say, with a wave of the actuarial magic wand, I can make any pension fund 100% funded. And if I don't like you, I can make you 20% funded. It's just a measure. Two actuaries looking at the same hole. So we say the average fund in the state is whatever it is, and that's because the state actuary uses the same actuarial assumptions to measure every pension fund in the downstate police and fire pension system. He can come up with an average. By the way, this is Evanston. Evanston is pretty heavy in the average. You take Evanston, Joliet, Peoria, Springfield, Aurora, Naperville, large funds, they're going to influence the average. So it's very important to the state that Evanston is being, quote, well-funded. Of course, I don't really believe the state assumptions, so that's the problem. It really is a myth, and I don't get excited about what percentage funded we are, because I know that every pension fund in the state is going to be 100% funded in 2020. Excuse me, I mean 100% funded in 2033. Excuse me, I mean 90% funded in 2040. It's a constantly moving issue. The one thing that we need to understand is what was referred to as the fundamental equation of pension funding. Now, unfortunately, I'm a mathematician, so this has to be a little bit of math. Everybody has taken high school algebra, I hope. This is the basic equation of pension funding, and it says as follows: C plus I equals B, plus a little e. Contributions plus investment return equal benefits, plus a little for expenses. And it's always, always, always true. What goes in, contributions plus investment return, is exactly the amount that is needed to pay the benefits. And it's always true, as I say. The problem is it's only true at the end. We can look at this and say, my heavens, we've just paid out the last benefit out of this pension plan, and look at that. All the contributions that went in, plus all of the investment earnings, were exactly the amount that was needed. And we have no money left over. Well, that's somewhat helpful. The problem with this is we're in the middle. We're in the middle, which is not moving. Okay? Something just happened. Sir? There we are. We're in the middle. I'm sorry. We know exactly how much contributions have gone into the fund. We know exactly how much investment earnings have gone into the fund up to today, and we know exactly how much benefits have been paid from the fund today. We actually have a term for that. We actually call that the fund assets. Think about it. Everything that's gone in, less everything that's been paid out, are your assets today. What we don't know, what are the future benefits going to be? What are the future investment earnings going to be? And what are the future contributions going to be? Well, fortunately, there are people out here who have a diploma on their wall that says licensed estimator, and they're called actuaries. And they get to say, I can use my techniques to make a very good estimate about what the future benefits are going to be. I can then make a good estimate, not a prediction, an estimate of what the future investment earnings are going to be. And once I've done that, I can solve for what the future contributions will be to make this equation stay in balance, because we know that C plus I has to equal B. Once I have that solution, all I have to figure out is how do I get those C's in there? And we use a methodology of getting those C's in there. Now let me show you what the problem becomes. Let's suppose that we can eliminate the problem with the B. Someone up there whispers in my ear and says, Art, I know what the B is going to be. He or she whispers in my ear and says, this is it. I say, thank God, I now know the answer. So I will make a calculation of how much C I need to put in, and we'll call that the real C, because I know if I put this C in, it will earn the exact amount of I that I need to make that B work. This gets a little existential, so bear with me. So I come to the municipality and I say, here's the C that you must put in every year for this to work. And the municipality says, thank you very much. We're going to put in just a little bit less, just a smidgen. Well, in order for this equation to stay in balance, what has to happen to I? It has to go up, because C plus I has to equal B. So let's think about that. The less C I can put in, the more I am going to earn. The less contributions I put in, the more investment earnings I will have. Well, heck, I won't put anything in. It'll all come from investment earnings. And what really happens when you don't put the right C in? I is smaller than it should be, and ultimately C will have to increase, because C plus I has to equal B. Likewise, maybe a municipality says, we're feeling a little wealthy this year. We'll put a little bit more than that C in, and therefore I will have to drop, but clearly I will go up. And ultimately, that C will come down. And we talked about intergenerational equity. Let's make the current generation of taxpayers pay for the pensions. Let's not pass it off or give credit to the future generations. There are better things to do with your money than to put more into the pension fund that is needed. So here we are. All we have to do is figure out what the C is. We've done our actuarial work. We've calculated the B's. We've calculated the I's. We've used our actuarial assumptions and methods. And we've determined how much C has to go into this pension fund or these pension funds. Actuaries use a budgeting approach. And they have many, many different types of methodologies. They call them funding methods. And the new pension law, the one that started in January 1 of 11, for the first time mandates the actuarial methodology for public safety funds. Absolutely tells us we must use it. Now, funding methods, we must use something called the projected unit credit method. Now, funding methods are really a methodology, as I say, of budgeting. Some of them increase, some of them decrease. All types of things. Some are measured in terms of being level. That could mean a level dollar or a level percentage of payroll. Level is a funny word. The method that has been traditionally used in public funding by virtually every actuary, and in fact all of the actuaries prior to me here in Evanston, is something called, and you'll have the name of it, it doesn't mean anything, it's something called the entry age normal cost method. What you need to know about the entry age normal cost method is very simple. It's a level method. It's supposed to be the same amount every year, either as a dollar amount or as a percentage of payroll amount. But it is level. It's designed to be level. It spreads the cost out during an employee's career, and it levelizes them. The projected unit credit, which we call PUC, and I always envision this little Shakespearean actor running around when I say that term, projected unit credit, is an increasing cost method. The use of the projected unit credit is now mandated in Illinois. The costs are an increasing methodology, not a level methodology. And that can create some difficulty because the state of Illinois has told us that we can use projected unit credit. Yeah, that's right. We can use projected unit credit as a level percentage of payroll. Now, the percentage of payroll problem is unique to Illinois. I'm not a proponent of percentage of payroll funding. The unfunded liability, the portion of the hole that is not filled up, the dirt came up to a certain point, we call that the funded liability. The other piece is the unfunded. We're trying to fill the hole up. And this unfunded liability is like a mortgage. In 1980, everybody had a mortgage in the downstate police and fire pension systems, and we had a 40-year mortgage that we were going to amortize and pay off as a level dollar amount. And in fact, the interest rate was 6.5%. In 1988, they refinanced the mortgage and made it a 7% mortgage. Not a big problem, still pay it off by 2020. In 1993, they changed the methodology. They took the mortgage that was then outstanding and they said, let's refinance the mortgage on a new 40-year schedule. I've refinanced my mortgage 8 times since 1993, so I don't care about refinancing, but I always try to pay off my mortgage, as most people do, with a level dollar amount. But the state went to a increasing payment, a level percentage of payroll. If payroll went up, your contribution went up, your cost went up, your interest. We had if there were a $10 million mortgage in 1993, studies that were done by the Department of Insurance said at a 7% mortgage, we're going to amortize this at 1.5%. So if you have a $10 million mortgage and your interest cost is $700,000 and you only put it in at 1.5%, you're only putting $150,000 in. What happens when you don't pay the interest? It gets added to the principal. Sooner or later, that mortgage gets pretty big. In fact, the estimates were that if they followed the Department of Insurance recommendations at that point, and if all of the actuarial assumptions came true, if we really earned 7% on our money for every year, and if salaries increased 5.5% a year, as the Department of Insurance told us to, and if people retired the way they were supposed to, and if people died the way they were supposed to, and they never do. We like to tease and say, actuaries will tell you how many people are going to die. Sicilian actuaries will give you the names and dates. I hope I have not offended anyone. That's an old actuarial joke. Nonetheless, if that were to happen, that $10 million mortgage would grow to $35 million, and then it would begin to come down. People didn't believe us because in the 90s, we had some good investment returns. And then in 1999, we had the dot-com burst, and all of a sudden, we had some unfunded liabilities we hadn't anticipated, but we had some good investment returns until 2008, and then all of a sudden, we had a pension crisis in Illinois. The pension crisis was planned. We knew about this. We saw it coming. I consult to a small client in Southern Illinois, and not a very wealthy community. I won't tell you who it is, but they were 16% funded in 1993. We did the example for them and said, if you can follow the Department of Insurance and everyone cooperates and dies as they're supposed to, you'll drop from 16% funded to 6% funded. And when you get to 2029, 4 years before complete amortization, 100% funding, all you have to do is put in $100 million over the next 4 years to satisfy your liability. It works mathematically. It doesn't work on a practical basis. Nonetheless, the difference between entry age normal and projected unit credit is something like that. Projected unit credit depresses the contributions now and forces them upward later. It follows a very similar pattern to the salary increase. When you do, that's the normal cost. When you put that on top of the payment on the unfunded liability, which the state of Illinois has decided will also be paid as a level percentage of payroll, you get to the one methodology that the Internal Revenue Service in the private sector has said, because in the private sector, these types of pension plans are covered by the IRS because they're deductible. And they have said, Mr. Actuary, you can use any of the 1,000 of funding methods that you wish, except for one. You are not permitted to use the projected unit credit funding method as a level percentage of payroll. Why? Because it doesn't work. As simple as that. But Illinois, in its infinite wisdom, has, I believe, will do anything possible to retain their #1 ranking as having the worst funded pension funds in the country. and they have now gone ahead and mandated the use of the projected unit credit as the statutory minimum contribution. The projected unit credit is a level percentage of payroll. Marty, I'm going to let you handle the rest of these here. You have your numbers here for the city on your slides, and I can finish up with the balance of it.
Marty, before you start, thank you. Thank you. You have no idea what a great presentation this is, and I'm probably the hardest person on any actuary that's ever been up here. I think you did a benefit to our residents watching, to people in the room, and thank you. Really awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, so how do I follow that up? Just one thing that I placed in this presentation were the two relevant tables that is in your memo. And again, to follow up on what Mr. Tepfer just pointed out, the first line that you see is our original projection a year ago from GRS, Gabriel Roeder Smith, using the old actuarial guidelines. Their assumptions aren't really the point. It's that they were using the previous funding mechanisms. So with that, we'd have had an 8.8 million police and a 7.1 million fire. Using what we're recommending at the, as far as a revised contribution projection, you see the money is 310,000 less on one, 747,000 less on the other, but our funding ratios go up. And I can tell you, just after what you heard from Art Tepfer, I don't think this is a funny money change. We're putting in the dollar amounts, and I'll show you why I think that on the next slide. We're continuing to put in those dollar amounts with our assumptions and the actuarial method being chosen to get to that 45, 46% funding level. When you look at the next slide, you see that here's the state minimum. And with the state minimum, $2 million, it's down at the bottom, almost $4 million plus less in funding, yet using that method, we would be 48 and 47% funded. There's a credibility gap there, and so at the current funding level and the current method that we're choosing, we feel we're going to be in a much better situation 1 year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, where we will actually meet our the actuarial projections. We haven't met our actuarial projections in years. We did last year because that was the big rebound from the crash, but previous to that, we hadn't met our projections where we would actually have an actuarial gain and end the year better off than we thought. And with our new funding mechanism, and Mr. Tepfer is better at describing approach versus method, we stand a much better chance of the C plus I equaling the B.
And controlling the C. And that's the real key. It's the budgeting aspect of trying to manage the C to continue a level approach rather than an increasing approach. Marty brought something up, and it has to do with this. The reason that you look better funded on projected unit credit is because your current liability is smaller. Why? Because all of the normal costs are pushed way into the future. And we don't have much of a liability anymore. Well, when we take the same assets and put it in a smaller hole, you become better funded. It's an illusion. What is important is approach. What is important is methodology. The new law also changed the methodology of valuing the assets. This is where I'm sure that our legislators are smoking things. March 30th, on March 30th, this is where I usually give my Mark Twain quote. Mark Twain once remarked the following: suppose you're an idiot, and then suppose you're a member of Congress, but I repeat myself. This is ludicrous. All of our investment people in your 228 year end and every other pension fund that has an April 30th year end is supposed to determine the market value of assets of your pension fund on March 30th. There is no pension fund in the state I don't believe that there's a pension fund in the country that has a March 30th, not March 31st, mind you, but March 30th end of year. I don't know where they found this, but they did. We've been using a smoothing method, and Gabriel Roeder-Smith has been using a smoothing method for years. It's just a minor modification. We're just going to continue along. I've spoken to the Department of Insurance. They're not enforcing this provision. But nonetheless, that's what we have. The new contribution is a normal cost for the year. The normal cost can be loosely looked at as the cost to fund the pension that's being earned in the current year for the current group of employees, plus some amortization of the unfunded liability to a 90% target by the year 2040. Is that sacred? As sacred as the 2020 and the 2033 were. In 10 years or 8 years, when things get out of hand, it'll be 2056, it'll be 2062, it'll be something in the future. It's an ongoing system. Evanston will be here in 2040, Evanston will be here in 2056 and 2070 and whenever it's going to be. I don't get excited about it. And the key issues, almost done, if this works. Selection of the assumptions, yes, we do use different assumptions than the state of Illinois in the Department of Insurance. Yes, we do use different assumptions than your prior actuary. And the way that we get to do these things is exactly like this. It took me a long time to find that slide, so I appreciate the jocularity, if I may. I thank you. I have really nothing more.
I just want to, Madam Chair, I'd just also like to thank Tim Schoolmaster and Pat Dillon from the Police and Firefighters Pension Board, who worked with me and with Mr. Tepfer on the joint report this year, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Alderman Grover?
Thank you to everyone for a really wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
For your lucidity and and perspective.
Thank you.
On what's happening in Springfield. I have a silly question. Is Evanston considered downstate or upstate?
Evanston is considered downstate.
Downstate for the purpose of your actuarial
There are
evaluations?
two police pension funds in the state of Illinois, and codification, and two fire funds. Article 3 is what is referred to as the downstate police pension fund, and Article 4 is the downstate fire pension fund, and they are for municipalities which have fewer than 500,000 residents. Then there is the Article 5 and Article 6, which are for municipalities which have 500,000 or more residents. There's only one community in the state of Illinois that has 500,000 or more residents, and that's our neighbor to the south. So the Chicago pension fund is, police and fire pension fund are different. Everyone else is in the downstate system. There are 630 downstate pension funds, Evanston being one of the largest.
Alderman Rainey?
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Tell us how the I part of the formula is doing.
The I part. The trustees are charged with a very simple job. They are to go out and get the best investment return that they can with the amount of risk that they're willing to accept. We use an investment return assumption of 7%. What? 7%? My money market fund is not doing that well. How can you use 7%? Well, I used 7% in the 1980s when my money market fund was earning 17%. We are long-term. My time horizon is roughly 60 years. I am worried about the youngest police officer receiving his last pension payment. So my time horizon is long-term. I'm not so worried about the I at this point because I believe the trustees are doing very well with the limited investment authority that they have. But again, there have been good years and there have been bad years. If we trend this thing for the last 20 years, I think you'll find that 7% has been a very reasonable assumption. I think you were a little higher before we came in. I've been touting 7% for many years for the Evanston Fund. I think you're on the right track. I don't worry about year by year because we do smooth it and we analyze the assumptions on an individual basis, but mostly in aggregate to see how we're doing. We do what's called an experience gain and loss on our assumptions to try to quantify the all of the changes that occur in the unfunded liability. And that's the real key, managing the unfunded liability. Once we use something like the entry age normal cost, we've really controlled the cost of buying the pensions each year. If salaries go up, it's going to go up. Of course, it's a payroll cost. But it's managing this mortgage payment. It's getting it down to a manageable level and coming up with a methodology of amortizing it, of paying it off. That's really where we're at.
When you say limited investment authority,
Yes.
do you mean limited opportunities of products available to?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And specifically, we're still limited to 55%, and it changed again. Where are we at now?
Police are now at 50% equities, 50% bonds, and we were first time allowed this year up to 30%
Corporate bonds. Whereas IMRF could have their funds completely in equities, and therefore they could earn that 8% plus, and they're so large that they can handle that. Just if also for your other question, be happy to provide the council with a short report on where both boards have been for the last couple of years as far as actual investment returns. Again, it's a long-term horizon, but if that's a concern, we can show the very steep drop and then the comeback for the last 2 to 3 years.
I remember when we changed your council, or our council, whatever, financial advisors, we saw numbers. I don't think we've seen them in a while.
Well, I've never met a financial advisor who's not in the top 25%. In his return. I went to Rutgers, and half the class was in the top 10%. So I understand indexing as far as that's concerned.
I don't care about that. I'm just saying that we haven't really seen any numbers lately.
I'm sure that that's available. The boards. Jim?
Those are furnished annually to the mayor and the council.
But we'll provide an update.
Nobody talked to us about it.
Yeah. I think we're, presentation done?
Just one question. Would you also like a similar presentation at council? What's the committee's pleasure, just for purposes of time management this evening?
We can tell them about it.
We can tell them about it, but I believe this would actually, if we can get a snippet of this presentation and make sure to send it to the council. I don't believe we've had as straightforward a presentation that's digestible in the entire time I've been on council, which is not very long, but I've not seen this happen, and I think it's very helpful for all council members and for others to get a better understanding of how what our pension issue is and how actuarial assumptions are made. So, thanks.
Thank you.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Okay. We have a motion to adjourn.
When do we reconvene?